My name's Jason. I'm an artist. I've been working in games for almost 20 years at big companies and small companies, and now I do freelance work and run an indie studio. And I like to draw. I've been doing programming, but I've been drawing and doing art and games for most of my career. And I thought I would prepare a lesson to help everybody else learn how to draw a little bit, because drawing might be kind of scary. It's kind of a weird thing to do. And maybe you think you can't do it, but I want to show you that you can, with some pretty easy strategies for warming up your hands and looking at things differently and practicing. So we're going to try a little bit of that tonight. I brought in some paper and some figurines and some drawing utensils. I should say, for one of the exercises, you need two pencils, writing utensils, so grab two. This was a lesson that I prepared for the game art orbit thing, and now I'm presenting it to you. I'm going to start off with explaining why lines are just lies. There are several reasons, and one of them is lines are used to create images on paper, on canvas, digitally, and they represent things, but they are not those things. They are just representations. Even photograph is just a representation of the thing that you took a photograph of. And so, in one sense, it's all a lie. Now, we use lines to draw things like a pipe. And you look at those lines and you say, oh, that looks like a pipe. It's a pipe. But that's a lie. It's not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe or a drawing of a pipe. And that's a really famous image in art history when somebody realized that and called it out. And it's sort of a joke, but it's become like a staple in art world that this is not a pipe. There's a drawing of a pipe and it says in French, this is not a pipe, because it is not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. And then there's a lot of puns that have been done on that, like Mario, and this is not a pipe, and this is not a trap, which is kind of funny. So we're just going to keep going with that theme that lines are lies. They are just a bunch of marks on a paper, and they end up looking like something sometimes, and then you have communicated to the viewer the thing that you wanted to communicate, and that is a successful drawing, a successful image. When you're drawing, you are looking at an object or imagining an object, and you are translating. Your brain is telling your hand to translate that from 3D in the real world or in your brain onto a piece of paper. And that's translating from 3D to 2D. And it's a really crazy thing that your brain is trying to do. And so it takes a lot of practice to develop a skill to be able to do that in a way that people will say looks good. I think as long as you communicated what your goal was, then it's successful, whether it's very well done or not very well done. And so one of the first exercises that I try to have people do is this finger drawing or air tracing exercise. And it's kind of like, what is that? Well, it's fun. So what I want you to do, and this may sound crazy, is to take a look at these three Scrabble tiles on the screen there. And let's take the W, for example. And if you look at the leftmost corner and you put your finger on that corner, and then you draw with your finger down the left side to the bottom, and then up the right side to the right, and then up again to the top, and then down to the left again. You've just gone clockwise around that, and you've drawn that shape. Now take your finger and draw the W. Now draw the 4, right? And you can even draw the shadow. The shadow intersects the T and goes around like this. So the thing that you're doing here is your brain is telling your finger to draw this thing. And because your arm is one length, you're drawing on a plane in space. It's sort of like drawing on a piece of paper. So now we're just going to insert a pencil into that formula and a piece of paper and do the same exact thing. So if you ever think like, hey, I can't draw, just remember to take a step back and start with the air tracing exercise. And just look at what you want to draw and trace it with your finger. And then you're already going down the road of telling your brain how to tell your hand how to draw that thing. It sounds crazy, but it works. Lines on a surface define a border, a surface, a motion, and lots of other things. So I found these two images that are like collections of what lines do. There are famous artists like William de Kooning and Pablo Picasso and they do things, and they just use lines And even in this de Kooning painting, I don't know what those lines are. Are they? Is it a person? Is it somebody with crazy hair, or is it like a horse? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But these lines are like emoting to you and like giving you a feeling, and the way that they're angled and the curves that they have. When you look at Pablo Picasso's picture, you obviously see a person, even though it's kind of messed up like Pablo Picasso does. You still get that idea that it's a person. The lines can be different thicknesses, but sometimes people call it the weight. And those can be used to communicate things differently. A thick line may be closer to you, a thin line may be farther away. And you can use different types of lines, straight, zigzag, broken, curved, to communicate different things. Like even if you're making a map and you want to indicate a path of some kind or a mountain range, I look at those squiggles and I see different things, right? You can also use lines to communicate texture. There's a block of texture in the middle there. I don't know what that is. Is it rocks? Is it a carpet, a rug, or some kind of fur, or like a close-up of skin? I don't know. Vincent van Gogh effectively uses lines here in different. He has different weights of line and different curves to the line, squiggles and stuff. And then you magically get a sense of a little village with the forest and bushes and fields, and maybe there's a path in there somewhere. And that's the magic of lines. A couple other examples there, like squiggles. You can just have a squiggle of lines, and that can be something. And then if you start organizing your lines, you can start to shade things and create more 3D depth to them. And then this other image is showing some more examples of that, like the contour or the outline of something is a very simplistic line, but you definitely see a person there and an apple, a profile, and a house, right? And lines can also communicate mood through their thickness or if they're scribbly or like lightning bolts, like what kind of emotion does that communicate? So they're just different types of line on paper to communicate stuff. And if they're effective, they work, but you're basically lying to the viewer. Oftentimes, artists will have a short warm-up period before they start doing their work. And so this is an image, and I want to do some practice with some of these warm-up activities. These look like scribbles, but there's definitely a purpose to these. Here are some of the examples of warm-up exercises that some people do. Some artists will just jump straight in and draw the character that they know they're going to draw as a practice sketch or something. They'll draw a thing. But these are exercises to help you with your hand-eye coordination, your muscle memory, motor control, and stuff. We're going to try a couple of these up here where you draw a circle and then you make little connecting lines like wheel spokes. And then you draw a random scribbly shape, and then you connect lines in there. And that's just an exercise of like starting and stopping and going in different directions in a sort of straight line. Here we draw circles that are overlapping a certain amount, and we try to keep that certain amount consistent throughout. This is just, you start with 2 dots, make 2 dots, and then make a large circle that uses those 2 dots on the circumference of the circle, and then a smaller circle and a smaller and a smaller and a smaller and smaller, but always touching those 2 dots. And then you get larger and larger and larger on the other side. And this is a similar one where you draw 3 dots and then draw a circle that's connecting those 3 dots. But you can draw multiple dots at once and try to make different size circles. This one we will also do where you draw a long, elongated or wide I-beam and then draw a circle that's touching those 3 sides, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner as you get towards the center, and then you get wider and wider and wider as you go out. Here the person draws a path, and then they kind of draw ellipses along that path to make it look like a tube, like a tunnel. And that's sort of what they're doing here, is drawing a bunch of straight lines and then drawing curved lines in between them, connecting 2 of these straight lines to make sort of a little path. This is supposed to be like a torus shape, but instead of drawing around this way, they're drawing the torus in this. It's a different way of looking at a torus, and it's kind of difficult to visualize. Here's another tunnel that somebody drew as drawing practice. So these are all different exercises. Here they drew a cube, but they used like kind of random angular line work here to give the overall shape of a cube. Okay, so let's try some of these. There are 4 here that I'd like to try. First, we draw a circle, and it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. It can be even an oval or an ellipse. It doesn't matter. And then you define the center, and you go out to the edge, and then back, and then out to the edge and back, and out and back, and you make a pie shape. pie piece, pie, another pie piece, and you just go around until you're done slicing that circle up into pie pieces. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to draw a circle, and it's going to be a crappy circle. It doesn't matter. And then find the center, visualize the center, and go out to the edge and back and make a pie shape and come back. And oh, I went past it. I did it again. You should be doing a little better because you're looking at the paper as you're drawing. I'm working on a Wacom tablet, so I have to look up at the monitor and hope that my hand does what I want it to and stops when I want it to. I ended up getting some control back in there, and that's basically it. So hopefully you were able to kick one of those out. And the next one is kind of draw like a random squiggly line shape, and then start connecting, like drawing angled. So this is the initial shape is roundish, and then you draw these angular lines inside and like bounce around until you decide, now I'm going to break it up into pie pieces, and then bounce around again and break it up into pie pieces. And you're just drawing more lines to see, like, can I make myself stop when I hit another line? So I'm going to try that over here. What? And then I'm going to stop and start drawing angled lines. And then move over here and do the same thing at weird angles. Yeah. It's difficult. But this is working on your hand-eye coordination and your muscle control of doing little small things. So these motions are all captured in the palm of your hand. You're moving the pencil around, or a pen, or whatever it is, just doing little motions with the palm of your hand. You could do a huge one and like use your whole arm and see how you do that way. Sometimes it's good to work big and see if it changes the way that your body is functioning, how your brain handles it. All right, I'm going to start over here with the next lesson. This is the one that I mentioned before where you draw a bunch of dots. Here they drew 5 dots, and then they started drawing circles that connect 3 of those dots. And then they first chose these 3 dots, and then they chose these 3 dots, and then these 3 dots, and then these 3 dots, and they just keep drawing circles. They aren't perfect circles. They're loosey-goosey circles, but they're trying to hit those 3 dots. So that's your target. Can I hit these 3 dots and make circles? So if I draw some circles, I'm going to draw 7 circles, and then I'm going to pick 3 and try to draw a circle that connects them. And I missed, but that's fine. And then I'm going to draw, wow, that's not working. But that's part of the exercise, right? Let's draw these 3. All right. And then these 3 here. And, wow. I sort of lined them up. What if I draw these 3 here? Oh, that's a big circle that goes off the screen. Oh, this is funny. If I draw these, I can capture these 3. Well, it's sort of like 4. This is a little more difficult, right? All right, on to the next exercise. This is, I mentioned before, we're going to first draw 2 horizontal lines and then connect them in the middle. And then draw a circle that touches the 3 sides. And then make it into an ellipse that gets flatter and flatter and flatter and flatter. And then you go across that, so you're sort of drawing a slinky, right? And then it gets flatter and flatter, and then it gets larger and larger until you have a full circle over on the right. So first I'll draw a horizontal-ish line, and then another one, and then a vertical line down the middle. And I'll start drawing a circle that's touching those 3 sides. And then I'm going to still touch the middle, and I'm going to get thinner, and thinner, 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 and then I'm going on the other side. Wow, my ellipses are terrible. This is such a good exercise. But you get the gist of it, right? So the fun part is When you like think you've got it good in one direction, then you go the other direction, and you're like, what? No, I'm still going counterclockwise, drawing my circles. So if I were really going to challenge myself, I'd go clockwise. And so you can do these exercises multiple times, trying different things like that, going clockwise or counterclockwise. Woo! Or even trying your left hand or your right hand. All right, so we got warmed up doing some line drawings, and now I want to talk a little bit about silhouettes. That'll be the next thing that we work on. Silhouettes are very important in defining your character. A lot of what we're drawing tonight is character related, but this can be applied to other things. The silhouette of a tree type. A palm tree looks different than an oak tree, right? You see that in a shadow form or silhouette form, you're going to know that it's a palm tree versus an oak tree. So you look at these silhouettes, and if you are a part of the United States cartoon culture, you should recognize some of these silhouettes as cartoon characters, like Yogi Bear and Popeye and Charlie Brown, right? Silhouettes do not just have to be cartoons characters, they can be humans, and you can see the different activities that these people, we assume these are people, these silhouettes are lying to us, and we think they are people, they're just silhouettes, lines on paper. And they're doing different things, but we can tell they're doing yoga, or they're doing ninja stuff, or some kind of sports thing. And if those silhouettes were not black, they would just be an outline, and we could add more lines to define more features, like a tie and a coat here. We kind of get the idea that this is a male person with their arm up. Like if this was in silhouette form, would we be able to tell they're on their phone? Maybe that kind of gesture. Maybe they're putting food in their mouth. I don't know. So silhouettes are just, it's a clump of lines that look black. And we can add definition to that by adding more lines to define hairline, held objects, and other things. And so the next activity I want to work on is doing silhouette drawings. And this is where your figure comes into play. We're going to take our pens and our paper and hold up the figure, or maybe the figure's standing on the desk, the table somewhere, right? You're not supposed to take a long time with this. This is, you just do some scribbly lines to get the general silhouette. Kind of like this first image here. Like there are some lines to define the legs, but really you could scribble those in. These are probably more lines than I would say you want to do. So I'm going to grab my character and I'm going to hold it up and I'm going to start. I got something kind of goofy. I'm just going to scribble like there's this ear and then this head and another ear thing that comes up on this dunny.
Are we supposed to be looking at our paper when we're doing this? Or
yeah, you look at your paper, look at your figure. Like we're just working on the silhouette here. Later we will do those exercises. Yeah, you were in the lesson before, weren't you, Taro? So I'm just scribbling here. I'm super messy, but you kind of get the general idea of what this figure is. If I were to draw this with lines, it's got like kind of a triangle body that has two little legs, and then it has this really, really big round head with two like rabbit ear shapes off the top, and then these kind of very triangle-y arms coming off like this. And so that's what I was trying to capture with this scribble. I scribbled in one direction, but you can change it up and like scribble here to like get some different definition. And you don't have to scribble in a straight line either. Like if you feel like I'm going to start with the head and I'm going to make it like this shape like this, and then like the ear comes up like this. We're just scribbling to get a silhouette down fast. And a lot of artists do this. They'll probably work with something like a fatter pen. Like if I get something nice and big like this, then I can work a little faster, right? I don't have to scribble in as much. But a lot of times you want to get a feel, an idea of what your character is going to feel like in your game maybe you're trying to create like a big, heavy tank type of character, then you probably have a smallish head and then a big triangle body. It's like top heavy. And maybe a couple little legs to exaggerate how big that torso is, right? And then you have these big arms that come down into these giant fists. And I get a sense of this character just from the silhouette, like what they're about, if they're powerful, how many hit points they have, and that kind of thing. And so that's basically what this is working on, is just throwing down some lines to try and get a sense of the silhouette of the character. And a lot of times it defines the character and also the character traits of that character. And that was the silhouette practice. Hopefully you got one done while I was working on those. Let's move on. So the silhouette is kind of a shadow of the character, and that kind of gets us to light and shadow and color. The world is made up of light and shadow and color. It is not made up of lines. Manet said famously, there are no lines in nature, only areas of color, one against another. And I think that was true for even man-made or human-made things. It looks like there are lines, like even between the floorboards in this room. Those look like lines because the wood pieces come so close together that it looks like a line dividing them, but it's not. It's a little depression, and it's a little darker in there because less light gets in there, and so it's in shadow. It is not a line. But we can use lines to define those areas of color and give them shape. We can use lines to define the edges of things, like we did when we were tracing the Scrabble tiles. A line around that Scrabble tile is a square, right? So you can use line to define shadow, contrast, wrinkles, or basically everything. So if you look at this picture to the right, is that a Manet? It might or might not be, I'm not sure. The painting is all colors, light, and shadow, and you get the idea that this is a picture of some people having a picnic in the forest or in the woods somewhere. But if we took away all the color and shadow that make up that image, and we traced all of them around the contours of all of those things with lines, you'd get a different kind of image, but it would still communicate some people in the wooded area having a picnic. Both of them are lies. And then we have something called implied lines, and where we often draw lines to define an object, you can sometimes not draw lines and have the perception that there is a line there. So on the leftmost image, these are actual lines doing actual things, but these are implied lines. So a row of dots implies a line. We sort of naturally feel like, oh, there's a line of dots. Here's a line of dashes. The line that the top of these bars convey, right? These look like telephone poles to me, or electric poles or whatever, and because they're descending in shape, it feels like they're going off in space. There's a line of perspective there. Here we drew an outline around this apple, but we don't need to do that. We can, with shadow and light, like have some implied lines. Obviously, these random shapes of color and the lack of color imply an outline of an elephant. Here's a triangle and some circles, and they've got chunks cut out of them, and you may or may not be able to see the implied triangle that's there. There's the implied lines, and there's some more stuff about lines. Here's an outline, just outlining an arm or a leg. Looks like a leg. But here's some contour lines that define that shape a little better, and then cross contour, adding more definition inside, and then you start hatching to like create some. I can tell now that the light is coming from this direction, so there's hatching to create some shadow, and then you do more cross-hatching against that in the opposite direction, crosswise, to create even more shading. And they're all just lines. So lines and implied lines. There's lots of power in what you put down on paper or what you don't put down. Here's some more implied lines. So when you're drawing an image or taking a photograph even, if you can imagine the rule of thirds, where your image is divided by 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. So you divide the image into thirds, and there are 9 areas. And you put your focal point, that is the subject of your photograph, at the crossing of one of those lines. The surfer is here at the crossing of these 2 lines. The surfer could have been over here, or it could have been down here. But the surfer is here at the cross line, right? And the top of the ocean is here at this horizontal line. And this image feels a lot better. People tend to like this kind of image better than if the ocean were right in the center and if this surfer were right in the center or like cut off and had their head down here or something, right? So when you're taking a photograph, see if you can put a focal point on one of these lines, like the horizon here and the beach, like they kind of match up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's kind of close enough that it feels nice. And this will make your photographs and your drawings feel a little nicer, a little more professional. This is the one where you need 2 pencils or 2 pens. A lot of times when people are drawing, they're drawing these lines and they're trying to keep everything perfect. And we've been trying to not be perfect. And this is another example of doing an exercise and trying not to be perfect. So you take 2 pencils and you hold them together and you draw 2 lines at the same time and try to draw your figurine or your plant or whatever, your cat or whatever it is you have at home. And you'll end up with an image like this. You see a double image of the boots here and the double image of the hand here. This person sort of like cheated a little and held the pencils in line with each other as they created each line. So they kind of like, that's kind of a workaround. But the goal is that you go, well, it's not going to be perfect because I'm drawing 2 lines, and then you sort of just go with the flow and try to have fun and make something and not care that it's not perfect. I'm not sure if I can do this in Krita, if there's a way to do a double.
Maybe look for a wacky brush on the lower right-hand corner.
Right? Something like this. If I take my character and I'm like, okay, I'm drawing the head now, and I'm drawing the ear. Oh, I didn't make a big enough head. All right, I'm drawing the body. It's kind of a triangle body. And I'll draw a little hand here, arm. And it has like one eye in the center. Yeah, that worked all right. So the end goal is like you get a very loose interpretation of what your character looks like, your figurine or your plant or your cat, and it's messy, and that's fine. You're just practicing putting lines down. Drawing is not scary or hard or weird. Yeah. All right, everybody get something drawn there with a couple pencils? All right, on forward we go. Now I want to talk a little bit about drawing what's there and drawing what you know versus drawing what you know. People will often say, like, well, I want to draw this cat. And then they look at the cat and they go, okay, and then they don't look at the cat anymore and they look at their paper and they just draw a cat. And what ends up happening is they draw what they think a cat looks like rather than drawing the cat in front of them. So drawing what is there is not iconic imagery. It's the opposite of Picasso. So here you see like a cat and like a Picasso cat. We look at a cat and we have this kind of general oval-shaped head and then these pointy ears on the side and these like almond-shaped eyes with vertical pupils. And then you put like a weird human nose in here and a human mouth, like whatever. And then some whiskers pointing out of the side. It looks nothing like this cat, but we read both of these things like a cat. This is an actual cat. This is a picture of a cat. Okay, this is a picture of a cat, an actual cat, and this is a drawing of a cat. But what I'm trying to say is, well, let's take the tree. If you look at this tree, yes, it has a general oval shape and it has some like almond shapes for the leaves and then this kind of trunk thing and a hill. But if you looked at this, there's light areas and dark areas and like these almond shapes are like pointed in all different directions. And there's like a kind of a dark line that goes here and this arcs up here. Like things that make this tree unique and not iconic. So you try to look at the tree or the cat, and you individualize it, and you assume nothing about it. Like, okay, that's a cat, but I don't know anything about cats. Like, I'm an alien from a different planet, so I've got to be very careful, and draw what I see here, not what I know. So a lot of people get into trouble where they're like, oh, like the cat has got a circle head and like circle eyes, and then they end up drawing the cartoon of a cat. Maybe cartoon of a cat is your goal, but if you're trying to draw something realistically, you have to forget about all of that iconography. So you move away from creating a thing and more towards creating something descriptive, like, oh, I'm creating a pond or a tree or a truck. Like, the truck is made up of a box and cylinders and things, and so you draw those things. And anyway, look at what you're drawing and forget everything you know about it and draw what you see there. The whiskers going this way, the leaves going that way. And so to help practice that, we're going to do 3 exercises with drawing what you see, and we're going to do that by not looking at what we are drawing. And so you get these kind of messed up drawings that are a little bit awesome. So we're going to do this 3 times, and we're going to, the first time we're going to not look at the paper at all and just draw what we think. You're trying to make your brain tell your hand what to do, and you're not looking at what your hand is doing at all. And then we're going to look at the thing and count to 3, like I'm drawing 1, 2, 3, and then glance down and say like, oh, I'm like way off the paper, like I better move back. And then we're going to do like a 50-50 hybrid. So first, let's don't look at all. Let's take like 30 seconds or something to do this. I'm going to look away from my screen, and I'm going to try and draw this character. Got an ear up here, and then it's got another ear over here. I'm going to draw the eye this time, and then it's got the body coming down here like this that sort of forms a triangle, and then it's got these teardrop arms. I think there's a little thumb, and I bet I totally missed where this arm goes, and a little thumb in there. Oh, look, I'm not drawing hard enough at all, and I drew a complete mess. And that's kind of the point. Let's delete that and go to our next thing, where we're going to do a 3-second glance, right? You draw for 3 seconds, and then you glance at where your pencil is, and you fix it. Like, oh, I'm trying to draw the eye, and I'm way out here. I need to like move back to the correct area. Okay? I'm going to draw this circle for the head, and then I'm going to start drawing the ear, and oh, I got to fix it. Oh, okay, now I'm back looking at my thing. I'm going to draw the other ear, and then I'm going to look. Oh, yeah, that's not too bad. All right, now I'm going to start the body. 1, 2, 3. Okay, fix it, and go back. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now I can draw an arm over here, 2, 3, and a little thumb, and position myself for the other arm. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right. And you end up with something a little better, right? A little better than that first time. I kind of like that one, but I'm going to delete it. Bye. And we'll try this one more time, where we'll kind of glance back and forth, just like looking back and forth at the thing. Right? You don't want to draw what you know, you want to draw what you see, and you check in with your hand pretty regularly. So draw my circle head here, and draw an ear, and draw another ear. I'm off the page, whatever. Draw the eye here. Got this mouth I keep not drawing. And body comes down like this, the other side is down like this. Kind of. Yeah. Oh, yep. See, I looked too long on my drawing, and I drew the wrong thing. I drew what I thought it should look like, not what it does look like. And draw this thing out this way. All right. And that came out a little better. Still very sketchy, but I feel like it's closer than if I tried to look at it once and then draw what I thought it looked like. Just an exercise to remind you to draw what you see and not what you know. This next exercise, a lot of artists do to stop themselves from creating really sketchy drawings, because a lot of artists will draw a little line and pick up their pencil and draw another little line. They're afraid to draw one long continuous line. So what I mean is, Let's say I want to draw a circle, and some artists will say, well, I gotta sketch this circle out and draw like a draw. And so I'm picking my pencil up and drawing like a short little line, and I get a decently round shape, but it's made up of all these little scratches, right? Maybe that's the style you're going for, but essentially there's like this fear of drawing a long line, and there's a certain beauty in the arc of the flow of a line. And so you'll see a lot of artists who want to capture that flow and like create the perfect circle. So they'll draw a circle and then undo, and then they'll draw a circle and undo. They're trying to capture the motion of their arm, the beauty of that motion in one swoop. That's pretty good, pretty close. It's a lot better than the sketchy type of drawing. Anyway, in this exercise, we're going to draw our figurine, and we're not going to pick up the pencil at all. You can draw the contour of the figure, and then if you want to get into shading, you can see here where this artist started shading. This area is lighter and this is darker, so I'm just going to make wavy lines in here back and forth and all around, not picking up my pencil at all. And this person did the same thing, right? I'll change my line to a squiggly line to indicate this hair here, and be less squiggly or more squiggly in darker areas or lighter areas. This person didn't pick up their pencil, and they used the lines to create bright and dark areas. So the implied shadows in here and the highlights and reflections and stuff. So let's try and make an image where we don't pick up our pen or pencil at all. And you can look at your drawing as often as you want. It's better if you look at your object and draw your object. All right, here we go. Ooh, I had to lift up and ended up pressing down really hard. The pen is very sensitive. Oh, that's wrong. So you end up getting a sketchy type of drawing, but it's sketchy for a different reason. You're not picking up the pencil at all. But it's just to get comfortable with making longer lines rather than sketchier lines. All right, how'd you do? How's it feel? Does it look crunky like mine? This is a more difficult one where you draw the contour of your figurine in terms of the outline of the figurine. And then you draw the 3D contours, the curves of the object to try and make it feel like it's coming out of the paper, like it's popping out towards you, right? So I get the sense that this is a hand, and then this thumb is rounded based on these contour lines. I see that they're holding a ball or an apple because these contour lines are arcing up. Like if it's over my eyelid, like it arcs up, and if it's below my line of sight, it arcs down. And so that feels like a sphere, an apple or something. And then this finger's pointed kind of right at me, so I see the tip, and then these round lines that show me the arc of the finger. This is a topographical contour lines in one direction only. And then these two images have topographical contour lines going in two directions. And so that's more like a polygon of a 3D object, right? But it's kind of loosey-goosey and you're drawing this round shape. The shell is pretty easy with these very circular lines and stuff, and then these arcs to show the length of it going back in space. All right, I'm going to stop talking and try to draw my little money here. So first I'm going to draw the contour of the outside of it, of this money. Looking at it regularly to check in with myself. Make sure I'm drawing the right thing the right way. It's got this mouth here. And coming off of that mouth is these legs that form the body. It's hard for me to get that angle. Alright, this is going to take some time. This is a little longer drawing. Alright, now I've got the basic contour of my object all drawn out, and I want to start drawing the contours that define the 3D nature of this object. So I'm going to start with this leg here and draw these curved lines like this that make it feel like it's round, right? Sometimes it's just like making half circles. This guy's pretty straightforward in that sense. You might have something way more complex that you have to do a lot more thinking about, like the waves of how the lines go over the surface. And these are imaginary lines. They're in your head that you're trying to put down on paper, right? Whoop, that was the wrong direction for that line. It looks just wrong. So I did all horizontal lines, mostly horizontal lines, and now I can try to add in some more lines to give you a little more shape, this guy a little more shape. These lines will exaggerate the belly coming out of this shape. Yeah, the shape of his head, right? It's kind of like I built this in 3D now. Well, it does the job. I'm going to move on. Let's talk about action lines. These are some more imaginary lines. They don't exist, but they help your drawings when you're drawing characters or other things to show the motion of what's happening in the image. So you can see here, action line typically follows the spine, and the head might be included in it because oftentimes humans move with their head first, and then their spine follows, and then their legs and limbs follow from that. So this person's jumping, and they form this nice arc. And this arm is sort of flowing off of that, like the tail of a comet, flowing off of that action line. And to make it even more exciting, there's this arm and this leg that are perpendicular to that action line. So now this feels very dynamic. And this person is like they're falling away or something. They're scared and they're jumping back, or maybe they got punched. And so this action line is this arc, and then their head follows that. And then it feels like they got punched because this arm and this arm and this leg are all like perpendicular to this action line. So it feels like a jumbled craziness. This person has a little of both, right? It looks like they're falling or crying out to someone, right? And so there's this action line, and this leg here sort of follows it, but this arm is definitely perpendicular, and this leg is definitely perpendicular, and this one is perpendicular. So like most everything just feels like, anyways, the action line defines the main movement of the character, and then you can exaggerate that with similar flowing limbs off of the character, or you can make it feel more dynamic and crazy sometimes with perpendicular lines. Tension, they create tension. So here's some examples of cartoon characters where there's an action line defined, and then they draw these simple 3D shapes with some contour to them to kind of define the primitive shapes that make up this character, right? There's like a bucket head and then a cylinder and lots of cylinders for legs. But you can see these action lines, right? This leg follows this curve of the spine, and then the head is leaning back, following that action line, and it feels very balanced and nice. And then there's like some dynamism with the angled arms coming off of it. But even this action line of the cat here, there's the bat that sort of flows with that, right? So it feels like this nice uniform character. So when you're defining a pose for your character, you often will start with just the action line. And then you'll say, okay, here's the head, and then here's the arms, and blah, blah, blah. But people will just start with the action line. And it works really well to create a dynamic pose or an action movement. So what we want to use action lines for in sketching people is gesture drawing, where you do a very quick sketch of the human in whatever pose they're doing. And you can see here, this artist probably started with an action line for the spine, and then they created the head and a torso and like hips area. There's some lines where they define the legs a little bit, and then they went back and they fleshed things out with a little more defined shape. Okay, the thighs like this and the calf is like this. But you kind of get a sense that they started with spine, leg, hip, shoulder, arm. Okay, now I'm going to fill it out. This person took a different approach. They're a little more sketchy. You can see the thin lines here and there. But the action lines are less on the spine and more defining the shape of the character, but they're really nice lines. I get a nice sweep here for this person standing with this cane. It feels very sinister as opposed to another type of character who's standing with a cane, right? I don't know what this person to do. Maybe they're holding a bow and arrow, but there's this nice shape here, right? And that's defined by these lines. And this is a nice pose here. And see that there's a kneeling character with their hands behind their head and their elbows here pointing up. Gesture drawings are often very, very quick. And they're messy. It's almost like you're holding two pencils, and sometimes you don't look at the paper and you're just looking at the model and you're scribbling a little head here, and like the action line goes like this, and then there's the hips here and there's shoulders here, and you're drawing really fast. And that shows up here. All of the exercises that we've done and up to now, the two pencils and looking at the paper or versus looking at the subject, are useful when you're doing gesture drawing and drawing humans. Because they're moving so fast, you have to be responsive and move faster. These are a little more clearly defined, but you can still see how messy they were, like how they started with like a rough shape and then they defined it a little better afterwards. I'd like to point out that gesture drawing is not bubble people. It's easy to fall into that trap where you're like, oh, this is the thigh. I'll draw like an oval here for the thigh and look like this. And you can obviously tell the difference between these types of drawings where you're looking at the character and drawing the movement and kind of the lines of the thigh this way and the thigh that way, as opposed to like, oh, it's a thigh, and I know what a thigh looks like, and so I'm going to draw a bubble here, an oval here. That's drawing what you think you know and not what you're looking at. We talked about that before, right? Drawing what you see in the tree and not what you think you know a tree looks like. And this is an example of that being employed. Draw what you see here, and then it ends up looking like a human. You draw what you think you know here, and it looks like bubble people, which isn't awesome. This is a little note about ribs and hips. Like, so when you're doing gesture drawings, you will often like define the spine with the action line, the curve of the spine, and then a quick oval to define the ribs. And the rib cage looks like this. It arcs up in the middle, in the front, and the back, and like it holds your lungs. And so it's not an oval. That oval is a very rough shape, but you can kind of guesstimate that. And then a sideways oval for the hips, but some people draw like a little bowl for the hips, right? Some people will draw the hip bone like two little ovals over here, right? So that was just a note on the ribs, hips, and spine, because we'll be talking about that later. It's very important to keep those in mind when you're drawing humans. Here's some more action lines. If you really exaggerate action lines, you can get some really dynamic poses that are really fun. This looks like the happiest person ever running and jumping in a field of flowers. And this person is pointing at something, which is fine. But if you put a little action line in it and the leg and the arm follow that action line, this looks this looks even more emotive, right? And then if we do that, we exaggerate that even more, and we add an arm at a perpendicular angle to the action line, or a leg at a perpendicular angle, then it has a different emotion, and it feels much more exciting. Here's an example of Tom and Jerry, from some textbook somewhere, showing action lines and how they can work really well, and then how you can use action lines poorly and they don't work as well. This punching doesn't feel as dynamic or explosive or exciting as this one over here. You see how this action line, this arc of the back followed by the leg and the club or whatever that is, feels a lot better than this one here. And you can get those action lines better if you use long flowing lines and not sketchy little lines. So this is where maybe we practice some gesture drawing. Not with your little figure, but with some online resources. I have some references, some websites here that we can try out. So we can do a few of these for 15 seconds, really, really fast. And then a couple of 30 seconds, and then one for 1 minute. So I guess we're going to do 30 seconds since so we're going to do full body, all genders, clothed. 30 seconds. Let's just do 3 of these, and then we'll do one at 1 minute. This is a good way to kind of get the sense of what 30 seconds is and how fast you have to work.
Question from chat was, what is the website Jason is using?
Oh, this is reference.sketchdaily.net. So I'm going to start with the action line, and then I'm going to define the head and the shoulders. And 30 seconds is up. And we have another one. That's a bad one. I'm going to go forward. Here's an okay one. Action line. Find the head. Oh, 30 seconds is gone before you know it. Here's just this guy sitting. Find the action line. Not much action here. There's still a lot to pay attention to, though. Draw what you see, not what you know. And wow, I didn't even get the head in there. All right, let's do one at 1 minute so that we can try to get a little more accomplished. Here's our one at 1 minute. Is it decent? It's all right. Find the action line. Head. Oh, look at those shoulders. They're at a very strong angle. I don't know what's happening with her back arm there. Yeah, I didn't really spend my time wisely there. All right. So you can check out that website and practice drawing characters. And obviously they had a lot of different lengths of time. You can hold those up. So you can focus on the full body or just the face or different body parts to practice. Next, I want to talk about contrapposto, which is an Italian term that means something about balance. And oftentimes the human, because they have a weight to them, gravity affects them, humans try to be balanced. And sometimes, not very often, you will see humans standing with hips that are parallel to the ground and shoulders that are parallel to the ground. But that's not always a comfortable way to stand. And so oftentimes humans will shift their weight from one leg to the other leg, from one foot to the other foot. And doing that shifting, putting all of that weight on one leg causes that hip to go higher. And then the other leg does what it does. Sometimes it's off to the side, and sometimes it's closer to the other foot, but the knee is bent. And then, because this hip is higher, your shoulders have to do the opposite motion or angle in order to balance your figure. And sometimes your head does a little bit too. But often humans want to keep their eyes straight, like parallel to the ground. But contrapposto is more about the shoulders and the hips being at opposite angles like this. Not opposite, like juxtaposed angles. And you can see this in the statue of David over in Italy or somewhere, right? By Michelangelo. So the hips are going in one direction and the shoulders are going in the other direction, exactly like this figure over here. Here's another example of that. This guy standing here, you can see the action line of his head and spine, and then the hips are at this angle and the shoulders are at the opposite angle. And here is a primitive figure of that. This block chest and block hips are at these opposing angles. Contrapposto is just trying to find balance for the character. And so if you combine action lines and the contrapposto, you can make sure that your characters look and feel balanced when you're drawing them. They'll feel a lot better. They'll look a lot more professional. So pay attention to the action line of the spine and then the angles of the hips and the shoulders. You can see they're doing opposite things here. I mean, this one, she's leaning over. She's obviously off balance, and they're like both going in the same way. This feels very unsettled and unbalanced, and that's the whole point of this. But in the other ones, the shoulders are balanced with the hips so that these are sturdy, balanced-looking poses. So these are mannequins. That's kind of an old thing that artists used to use as reference when they didn't have the internet to look at poses, or like Clip Studio Paint or models of figures in 3D apps that you can look at and trace over or draw or use as reference. Artists used to use these mannequins to do a pose, and then they could draw the pose and draw clothing over it and whatever. But basically, what these mannequins are is cylinders for the arms and legs and stuff, and then balls or spheres for the joints. And so building a character out of cylinders and spheres will help your characters have more depth and weight to them when you're drawing stuff. So using spheres and cylinders help you build good structure to have solid contours. This artist is drawing these different poses using a kind of mannequin style. They start with an action line you can't see, but they must have had one, right? And then they pose the shoulders and the hips, and then they started drawing these cylinders and ball joints for the limbs and joints and things. And that's a really good strategy for building up your characters and helping them to feel not flat or like bubble characters. And here is another example of that. Drawing cylinders and spheres for the limbs and joints. So let's try some of that. Let's try drawing these characters in mannequin form. We do all gender, clothed. Let's do stationary poses and see what we get. See, this one's good. You're in a bodysuit and you got okay. Let's draw this one. First I'm going to do an action line. I'm going to do the head. I'm going to do the shoulders and the hips. I think got a lot of her weight on her left foot, so that hip is a little higher, and their shoulders are pretty even, but I'm going to make her right shoulder a little higher. And I'm going to do a rib cage and hips. and then start defining the cylinders and joints of this mannequin figure. But I had to lay in the groundwork of the action line and the hips and shoulders. Yeah. All right, we have 2 minutes left. Timing yourselves, okay? Should have been drawing lines like this for the arms and then draw my cylinder. Hands are pretty hard. We didn't get into hands. Don't worry about the hands. We got 45 seconds left on this drawing. How are your mannequins coming out? Just drawing some contours on mine to help define the shape a little better. The 3D nature of those arms and legs. Sometimes it's hard not to go from I'm drawing a cylinder into I'm drawing a bubble. Yeah, that would have been a bad one. Anyway, so you can see like the kind of poses that they have on this website that can be helpful for practicing drawing humans. And the more practice you do, the better you will get. And I think that's about it. Good job. You made it through. Now you know how to lie with lies. So do your practice, warm up, and don't be afraid to draw. Go draw good things. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
Okay, so what sort of things do you recommend for like tools to have? I mean, obviously we did a lot just with pencils here, but for a non-technical artist who is interested in at least starting for the prototype of the game that I want to do, obviously somehow that gets transferred into digital, but I am guessing I probably don't need something as fancy as a Wacom or Wacom or whatever they're called. But what would you recommend? Like iPad Pro sufficient? Any particular apps or programs or anything?
Yeah, I definitely don't think you need to drop a lot of money on a Wacom tablet or anything tech like that, really. If you want to get something digital, one of the processes I used was I would draw or sketch because I was more comfortable drawing on paper. I would sketch on paper and then I'd take a photo of it with my phone or my iPad, and then I would go into a drawing app on my iPad and I would redraw it digitally. Like the initial sketch is my rough, and then I can do the inks or like the final painting over that in, I like to use Procreate on the iPad, but there are a bunch of drawing apps on iPad. I mean, and that's another like cost barrier, getting an iPad and an iPencil or some other like type of pencil that works with an iPad. But I would do it on my computer as well. I mean, I had a Wacom tablet, but if you have any tablet or anything, like I just take a picture of it. And you usually have to play with the contrast to make it show up better. And you might have to change the perspective. Like if you accidentally take a photo of your drawing and it's like skewed, then you have to fix that digitally. But yeah, I did that for a long time. And now I mostly just sketch right in Procreate because that feels pretty natural now. But for a long time, I would draw on paper and take a picture of it. Yeah.
Am I correct in understanding that these are exercises that you should be doing on like a daily basis or like a specific interval?
These are, until you feel comfortable drawing, these are exercises to get people comfortable drawing, because I know that a lot of people feel like drawing or making art is a magic place that they can't get to. But hopefully these exercises showed you that you can do stuff. And maybe the stuff that you drew tonight was not great, but it was all about...
The comment was it came out better than I expected.
Yeah. That came out very nicely, yes. The point is to just, do something daily and become comfortable with holding a pencil, whether it's a real pencil or a digital pencil, and being comfortable putting marks down on paper. And then you can move on to other daily exercises or things to practice with. I mean, you saw, I don't do those things every day, and you could tell when I was doing them as an example that I was doing poorly, but it doesn't matter. I hope that you have more confidence now in drawing something or being able to create some kind of artwork. So go and try to do more. Thanks. Okay, bye.